Hey, what's going on? It's your boy BT, and I came here to talk some boxing with the thousands of True School Sports subscribers. Now, before we proceed any further, I want to give a shout out to my channel sponsor, Fighting Mad, the pound for pound kings of boxing apparel. Whether you're at the gym, at home, or at the fights, visit Fighting Mad for all your boxing apparel needs. Now, moving forward, okay, we're going to talk about something that happened, something very interesting that happened during the Kovalev-Canelo fight. It was very interesting because a lot was made of, obviously, the result of the fight. Some people argue was it fixed, was it not fixed. We're not going to talk about that right now. We're going to put that to bed for a minute here. Let's talk about Dazn. Let's talk about their presentation, or lack thereof presentation, because, listen, when Dazn was announced about a year and some change ago, I had very high hopes for it, and I still do. I still think Dazn, they're learning, they're ironing things out, they're getting better in some ways, but the one area that I have really not seen them improve in has been their presentation. Now, it's been unfair to compare them to HBO when HBO was in boxing, because HBO boxing presentation was unprecedented. But I would even say Dazon's presentation falls short to the standard of that of like a PBC. I think PBC even has better presentation than Dazn. So their presentation has already been questionable from the jump. It hasn't really improved that much. And this weekend was just an absolute, like, for lack of a better term, it was an absolute shit show. It was an absolute grade A, world class, top of the top, creme de la creme shit show with how they handled the Kovalev-Canelo fight and presenting it. Now, obviously, what I'm referring to is the fact that Dazn and all parties involved, Golden Boy Promotions, they thought it was a great idea to wait until Nate Diaz and Jorge, whatever his last name is, from Miami, the UFC fight. They thought it would be a great idea to make Canelo Alvarez versus Kovalev happen and delay the fight until the UFC main event was over and done with. Now, I thought that was piss poor. I would thought it was piss poor because, just, if you guys don't take nothing else from this video, like, the main idea of this video is this, like, what kind of message is it sending to the general public when you have the supposed cash cow and face of boxing, right, Canelo Alvarez? You're having him wait in his dressing room, okay, pacing back and forth, taking cat naps, laying on the couch. What kind of message is it sending to the general public about boxing and the legitimacy of it and just how big it is? What kind of message are you sending to the general public when you're making the cash cow in the face of boxing play second fiddle to Nate Diaz in the UFC main event? It's not a good lesson. Now, look, I'm just a kid from Daniel with some boxing T-shirts and some credentials on as well. Listen, my opinion means little in the grand scheme of things. I understand that much, but what I will say is this. Okay, smarter minds, more intelligent minds, and more inquisitive minds would have made, if they were going to go this route with competing with the UFC fight, then their best bet was to basically not have it on the same day as the UFC fight, because if you feel so strongly at the zone that the UFC fight was worth making the face of boxing, cash cow boxing, pace in his locker room and wait to fight until they were over. If you felt that strongly about it, then okay, then you should have put it on earlier in the day. But then you are smart enough to know that if that's how you feel about it in the first place, you're not going to put it early in the day, because you would still have to compete with the UFC undercard. And it's a known fact that the UFC they do a hell of a job with promoting all their fights on their card, not just the main event. And that's probably the biggest difference between how boxing is promoted and how UFC is promoted, because with boxing, 90%, if not 100%, of all the promotional dollars and all the promoter dollars are spent on promoting the main event, and the undercard guys don't really get any shine unless it's like a grudge match or some sort of hoopla outside of the ring is produced during fight week. Like, again, an example of that would be like Shakur Stevenson in his recent fight with Jarrett Gonzalez. They had the whole sister dynamic and the family dynamic. That got some eyeballs on the undercard. But outside of that, the guys in the undercard on boxing, for the most part, are pretty much left for dead, and they got to produce star-making performances to get any sort of attention. So That's the biggest difference between boxing promotions and UFC promotions. And then it's like, the fans, because of UFC goes about it that way, the fans of the UFC, of MMA, they're very aware of, and they're very engaged, and they're able to enjoy the card as a whole, as well with boxing. And I'll even say this for myself. I follow boxing and I'm involved in it every day. And I would even say, like, for the most part, I'm that way myself. Like, I just want to see the main event, because a lot of the times I get so focused on the main event because that's what's promoted. The undercard card as promoted in boxing. So, it would have just made more sense for, if Dazn really felt this strongly about having to go up against that big UFC fight, to have it on another day, because there really was no way to win, if that's how you're thinking. Now, who I really felt bad for, because, for me, I have all the energy in the world. Like, I'm 24 years old. I'm in pretty good shape. Like, I can run miles. I got a lot of mental energy. So, I was live here on YouTube. We started off being live at like 7:30, 8-ish, and the fight didn't start at 1 in the morning. So, listen, I can be under these lights, looking into this camera, and I have all the stamina in the world. But with the UFC fight, but not with me, but with the fans that actually paid money, because that's who I really felt bad for, was the fans that paid their hard-earned money. I mean, and these tickets weren't cheap. Like, I went back and I looked. These tickets, they ranged from as cheap as $400 in the nosebleeds to as high as $1,700 for ringside seats. So it was very expensive. It was a very expensive night out at the fights if you went, and to be sitting there waiting 45 minutes to an hour longer for the main event to start because of a fight that's going on the opposite side of the country, it's an embarrassment to boxing. And I really think Dazn might have set boxing back a couple of years with their decision, because of the fact that they decided to concede to the UFC, and it's basically saying that hey, UFC is bigger, and it's already bad enough because the UFC already there's already this narrative that the UFC is bigger than boxing, but now DAZN is helping contribute to it. So it's just not a good look, and it's got a lot of people in the boxing world pissed off about it. I'm pissed off about it, honestly, because, like, Dana White is the biggest winner of all this. Like, Dana White winds up being the biggest winner of this because, it was a massive event. You gotta think about it. The face of boxing, the cash cow of boxing, had to wait in his dressing room for his own main event because you were fighting at the same time, and they didn't think they can compete with you. So that's already one big feather in the cap. You had the president of the United States, Donald Trump, 45th president of the United States. He went to the fight, and that's already and he was a big boxing guy himself, so he wasn't at Canelo versus Kovalev, and he should probably be at Canelo versus Kovalev, but De La Hoya and him don't have a good relationship, so that's two feathers in the cap, and it's just overall a great night for the UFC. As for boxing, not such a great night, and it's just a bad look for the sport. So the zone's gotta tighten up. I feel like if you're not gonna go up against, if you're gonna put the fight on the same day as UFC, go on when you're supposed to go on. Don't wait another hour and some change for the Canelo fight to start, because the fight didn't start till like an hour, until like 1 in the morning Eastern Standard Time. So like I'm gonna say 1:20 probably got going around that time. So it was a bad look, and it's got a lot of people pissed off in the sport. Like Teddy Atlas, I got a tweet that I'm gonna read to you guys. Teddy Atlas, had a lot to say, as he normally does, about the zone and how they delayed the fight. Here's what he said about the zone and them delaying the Kovalev fight. He said, I quote, "First, the Brainiacs at the zone decided to do Canelo versus Kovalev the same night as UFC 244. Then they decided to wait until after the UFC fight before starting, conceding that the UFC is now bigger than boxing in their minds." That's how you grow an app? And that's what he said. So I'm gonna agree with Teddy, and Teddy went on to say that he would have basically did it on a different night, because UFC and boxing is two different markets for the most part, and I don't know, man. It was a shit show. I'm gonna leave it at that. So you guys let me know what you think in the comments down below. I think this was very, very bad for the sport, and I think for DAZN's next big fight, which will probably be a Canelo fight, they got to get it together, because they really the last two Canelo fights, you know, they had some malfunctions with their presentation for Canelo Jacobs. Now they're conceding to UFC the second fight. It's not a good look it's not a good look, and it's not a good message that you're sending to the rest of the world when you have the face of boxing, supposedly, because cash cow of boxing, conceding to UFC 244. So yeah, get it together, Dazn. Get it together.